I bet you didn't know that if you add mashed potato to your bread dough, you'll create the most fluffy, luxurious, light, delicious bread you will ever taste. Oh my gosh. It's really hard to choose a favorite recipe from my new book, but this is up there. It really is. Homegrown potato, mashed, results in the most luxurious bread I've ever seen or tasted. Wow. Oh, I'm amazed that these homegrown potatoes that I harvested a while back now are still good to eat. That's the beauty of potatoes and why they've sustained countries for many, many centuries. These potatoes, well, potatoes in general, originated in Peru and South America, and there's like 3,000 varieties. Now, this variety, I actually cannot remember what it is I planted, but they turn out really good and they're going to be perfect in this potato bread. I always recommend organic, but what you need is something quite waxy, something that isn't going to be too powdery or absorb too much water. A Maris Piper or a Charlotte potato or something like that would be good. So cameraman Tom has just noticed that I pull a very funny, weird face when I'm peeling these potatoes. Now, I don't know why I do that, but it takes some concentration, but I do find peeling potatoes, especially with a knife, very therapeutic. I may pull some weird faces, but it makes me feel very relaxed. And it does remind me of watching my nan as a young kid making soups, and she'd peel potatoes with a knife, and I always used to think, wow, my nan is like a superhero. She's got skin made from iron. The knife touches her finger and everything, but it doesn't bother her. And there's me with my little peeler, and it takes me ages. But here I am, copying my Nana O, pulling all kinds of weird faces. I'm just going to peel these now and make a simple mash. We all know how to make mash. Just get your potatoes in some water, let them cook away for about 8 to 10 minutes on the stove until just tender. You really don't want them to get waterlogged. Just let them get just cooked. Let them steam dry a little, reserving the water because I'm going to use that cooking water in my bread dough. And then I'll pass my cooked potatoes through a potato ricer. Now this is just a little pro cook tip that I like to use. We would use these potato ricers in the kitchen to get the smoothest mash. But if you don't have one of these, just use an old-fashioned masher. Lumps are always in the right places, so it doesn't matter if there's a couple of lumps, but as smooth as possible for this bread dough. So there's the mash made. Just keep it plain. You don't want to add any flavorings to this. We're going to add a load of flavorings to the bread itself. But this recipe is actually from my new book that you can pre-order right now, and I really need your support. I really need you to get behind this one. If you've ever watched any of my videos or content over the years, then please support by ordering my book. This is called Plant to Plate, and it's full of recipes like this that use vegetables that I've grown or that are easily accessible for you guys, and you can turn them into something special. So please support me. You will absolutely love this. There's everything from herbalism, foraging, to homegrown recipes and stories from my homestead. So please get that right now. Anyway, so the first thing I'm going to do into my mixing bowl, we're going to start with some wet ingredients. I'm going to add 1.5 cups of that reserved potato cooking water. To it, I'll add some sweetness. Now you can add something like maple syrup or some sugar. I'm going to get that in the bowl, and then some extra virgin olive oil. Mix all that, and then I'll add some fast active dried yeast. Now I want this recipe to be super accessible. That's why I've chosen to use fast active dried yeast. But if you want to use a sourdough starter, then of course use it, and you'll get a tangy, sour, and even more beautiful fluffy dough. So that yeast has had a little bit of time to activate. Now we're going to get 2 cups of my lovely mash into this. It does seem a little bit weird mixing mash into the liquid, but trust me, the potato does something incredible to this bread dough. And any leftover mash, what I would recommend doing, you can make something like bubble and squeak, where you mix through a load of leftover veg or any cabbage or sauerkraut or something like that, and you just coat them in flour and cook them in a little cast iron skillet. They will be absolutely delicious. Or you could just top some leftover chili or a bolognese with some mashed topping, bake it in the oven. So there's plenty of ways you can use up leftover mash if you make excess. Well, it's got to the all-important moment where I need to add the flour to this mix, and this is where I find I've used a bowl that is too small, but it's fine, we're going to work with it. So you're going to add flour to this. Now the choice of flour that I'm adding is spelt flour. You can find spelt flour at all good supermarkets these days, but I'm switching to more ancient grains, and I'm recommending that you do too, because they're less processed, they have more nutritional value, and they haven't been modified over the years through industrial farming. So they're much better for you, just like bread used to be back in the day when we would sustain ourselves on really good quality, nutritious bread. And you're gonna add a pinch of salt, and I'm also gonna add some fennel seeds, which is just an optional ingredient, but that aniseedy flavor is beautiful. So I'm just bringing this all together till it forms a lovely dough. And what I will say is, guys, when it comes together, it will feel a little wet. And don't feel like you have to add extra flour to stop it from sticking to your hands. The more flour you add, the more dense and just rigid and hard your bread's gonna be when it's baked. You want a wet dough that's sort of sticky to the touch. And the more you knead it, after about 5 minutes, it should get elastic and that stickiness should disappear. So as soon as this comes together, I'm going to turn it out onto my board and just start kneading. You know, I mean business when I got my apron on. And this is very reminiscent to working in the kitchens, kneading dough, making rolls, making bread for service and things like that. And it was always in a nice welcome break to the chaos of the kitchen. You would go down into the pastry section and you'd be able to just have an hour or two of just kneading, balling up dough, making bread. It was really nice. But what I will say is that we live in this chaotic world now, and it's really important now that we harness any creative energy that we do have into doing stuff like this. I feel like a lot of my peers, people who I grew up with, you know, we outsource our entertainment so much nowadays through TV, Netflix, all that stuff, TikTok. And of course I'm on those platforms too, but when I'm doing this kind of stuff, making bread, feeling that self-sufficiency, little honor, it's very therapeutic and rewarding, and it makes you feel good. And yes, there's investment of time, but it makes everything taste better. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you've done a good job. So remember how therapeutic and how rewarding and how great and peaceful cooking is. It's not just a chore to feed you. So the moral of the story is, start doing some cooking, start making some bread, and you'll reap the benefits for sure. It's so fun. I love working with dough. Once your dough is smooth and you've kneaded it for about 5 to 6 minutes, get it back into the bowl with a little olive oil to stop it sticking as it rises. The dough needs to rise somewhere warm now for around an hour, or until it's doubled in size. The best way to do this is to cover it in a damp tea towel and just place it somewhere warm in your house. Because I love this bread so much, I've always got a batch or two on the go, and I've actually pre-risen some, so I don't have to wait for this one. I'm ready to cook straight away. Now, if you want to speed up the process, what I recommend doing is making the dough up until this stage and popping it in your fridge overnight, and during that time it will rise up, and in the morning you can get straight into the cooking process, which is what I'm going to do now. Once the dough has risen, knock it back, then turn it out onto a lightly floured work surface and divide it into 2 equal portions. Shape each piece into a loaf shape, then place them into lightly greased loaf tins.
All right, so these need to rise one more time. Shouldn't take longer than 45 to an hour. And we'll get that damp cloth back over the top, put them somewhere warm, have a cup of tea. Before you know it, these will be ready to go in the oven. So I'll preheat my oven to around 200 degrees Celsius in about 30 minutes.
Oh wow, look at that. That has risen up. I really need to work on my proportions. One has risen so much more, I must have put so much more dough in this one. It is fine, it's rustic, it's home cookery. This is going to result in the most beautiful, fluffy, ginormous loaf. This one will be its younger, smaller sibling. Anyway, these are going to go on a tray into the oven now, and we will bake them for around 40 minutes. The smell is incredible. Let's get these out. Oh my word. Look at them. Wow, look at these. If it sounds hollow, they're ready. 40 minutes will do it. I'm gonna get these out onto some wire racks and we'll let them cool before tasting. That's an easy one. Oh, they feel so light. I can't wait any longer. Let's cut into this. Oh, it's so soft. Oh, so soft. Look at that springiness. It's almost like souffle. Oh my word, the bubbles in that. And that is the magic of potato bread. Wow. I'm not even going to put anything on this. Just straight, plain. This would make the perfect sandwich bread as well, I think, and toast. But that reminds me of like any sort of, even like Japanese souffle pancakes almost. It's got that real aeration and that springiness. It's so soft with a lovely crust. Anyway, enough of me talking. Let me give this a taste. Doesn't need any butter, doesn't need anything. Oh my gosh. It's really hard to choose a favorite recipe from my new book, but this is up there. It really is. It's like choosing amongst babies because they all mean so much to me. But this one, homegrown potato, mashed, put through a bread dough, results in the most luxurious bread I've ever seen or tasted. I love the addition of the fennel seeds. It's an optional ingredient, but really that aniseedy flavor works so well with the sort of nuttiness of the spelt. I'm getting quite good at describing food nowadays. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time. So that's the potato bread. Now, I hope you really want to know how to grow your own potatoes. It's so simple. It's actually simpler than making this bread. So let's go out into the garden. I'll show you how you can plant your own potatoes to eventually turn into potato bread. I'm glad you stayed to the end of the video so you can learn how to grow some potatoes. Growing potatoes is one of the easiest things ever. I'm still a new
grower, but potatoes is one of the first things that I mastered. It's that easy. And actually you don't need a whole lot of room either. I could have been doing this when I lived in London on a little balcony and had some potatoes growing. It's so simple. You don't need a big garden, as I said. You don't need any beds. You can literally do them in buckets. As long as you've got some buckets with holes in the bottom, you can grow potatoes. All you need is these, some soil, and the potatoes themselves, the seed potatoes. More on those after. I'm gonna start filling these buckets up now with some good quality compost, which is the other ingredient. So the only expense really when it comes to growing your potatoes is your compost. Now we've all bought compost before, I guess, from your garden centre or DIY store, and you can get really good organic stuff from the stores. Ideally, you could be making your own at home if you've got the space. I always recommend having a compost heap. I just fill it up with my kitchen scraps, grass clippings, any organic matter, even like cardboard goes on, and I've been able to harvest a ton this year that I spread onto my beds. So what I'm using in these buckets is a mixture of that homemade compost and also some shop bought too, just because I didn't have quite enough of homemade. Just make sure the compost you're using is full of vitality, it's rich, and the potatoes will feed on that and produce delicious, big, bountiful harvests. So I'm just putting 2 to 3 potatoes in each bucket for buckets this size. My potatoes are just organic supermarket potatoes that I have put on my windowsill inside my house to sprout. And when they sprouted this much is when I'll plant them in the ground. So I'm planting the potatoes about 5 or 6 inches beneath the top of the soil. And these are a variety called Charlotte potatoes. My sister's called Charlotte, so that's why I've chosen these ones. And from memory, they taste pretty good too, but you know, who doesn't like a potato? So what I do after planting them is actually cover the top of the soil in some wood chip. This is totally optional. You could also use grass clippings too, or straw, and that's just going to stop the soil from drying out, and it will mean that I don't have to water these buckets as much. So you just need to leave your potato buckets somewhere where they're going to get plenty of sun. Ideally 6 hours a day of sunlight would be great. That's quite rare here in Wales, but hopefully we'll have more days like today. I'll water them every now and then, but the beauty of having them in buckets, if they get in the way or it gets really cold one night, I could put them in my greenhouse, or you can put them in your shed overnight. With spring being very early, we're still potentially going to have some frosts in the night, so if it does say in the forecast that it's going to get really cold, I can just put them in. And that's the beauty of having potatoes in buckets. So in a matter of weeks, we'll start seeing some plants appear, and then a few months down the line, once those plants die back, the potatoes will be ready to harvest. I harvested loads last year, just growing potatoes in the exact same way, but rather than in buckets in my raised bed, and only 10 potatoes turned into tons of potatoes. So I really recommend growing potatoes even if you have the smallest of gardens, and you can multiply your money basically. All right guys, thank you so much for watching. Please support and get the book, whether you like growing food, whether you like cooking food, whether you like preserving food, or even you just like eating food or food in general. Please get the book, support the channel, and I'll really appreciate it. So thank you so much. So I'm gonna put my potatoes over here to grow. We'll check back on these in a few months. Don't forget to say a little message to your potatoes when you plant them. Wish them well on their journey. Wish for big harvests, and I'm sure they will thank you. See you in a bit. Oh.